I wanted to cover a topic today that was very meaningful to my Christian life early on, and that's Messianic prophecy. I was shocked when I first started to realize, as God increased my understanding, how much the Old Testament had to say about Jesus. And the first section I would like to cover is Isaiah chapter 53. Because in my opinion, it is more clearly about Jesus than any other part of the Old Testament. And yet 52 through 54 is also messianic and talks about how the gospel will go into all the world. But 53 is what I want to emphasize first to those new to the Bible. And I will also go into 52 and 54, hopefully in another video. I'll read the whole thing first and then break it down for you in case you missed something. Isaiah 53. Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid as it were our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. Yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray, we have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him, he hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed. He shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see of the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death, and he was numbered with the transgressors, and he bare the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. And now I will take that verse by verse. Verses 1 and 2. Who hath believed our report, and to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness, and when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. Jesus did not come as a star, or as a conqueror. That is reserved for the second coming. Having no form or comeliness is also possibly a reference to the fact that he may not have had much physical beauty. Either way, Jesus did not come to be a supermodel, and a backup verse for that we have Zechariah 9:9. This book of Zechariah is also very messianic. I hope to cover that in a future video. And it says, Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly and riding upon an ass, upon a colt the foal of an ass. So he comes humbly. And that literally happened. He literally, what the Catholics would call Palm Sunday. Verse 3. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. And we hid as it were our faces from him. He was despised and we esteemed him not. Okay, so Jesus is going to come meek and lowly to the people, like a tender plant. He certainly had the power to come and immediately destroy his enemies. But that wasn't God's plan. Instead, he comes in meekness and is rejected. Not only rejected, but despised. The Talmud says that he is in hell being tortured and burning human waste. How much more despised than that can you get? And certainly the Gentiles are no better. The media is always portraying Christ in a mocking way without it fazing anybody. And also you have to consider that the country with the easiest access to Christ's words has almost no knowledge of him. Alright, so verse 4. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. So the people that tortured Christ were the same ones that were saying it was God that was afflicting him. And perhaps that's a natural consequence of man's self-worship. Let's look at another backup verse. We have Psalm 22:7, where he says, All they that see me laugh me to scorn. They shoot out the lip, they shake the head, saying, He trusted on the Lord that he would deliver him. Let him deliver him, seeing he delighted in him. By the way, if you read Psalm 22, the entire thing is about Jesus. Hopefully I'll also make another video about that in the future. Let's also look into the New Testament to get a better idea of what he's talking about. Matthew 27:41. Likewise also the chief priests mocking him with the scribes and elders said, He saved others, himself he cannot save. If he be the king of Israel, let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe him. He trusted in God. Let him deliver him now, if he will have him, for he said, I'm the Son of God. Verse 5. He was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. So this is obviously about Christ, and this is a great mystery of God. With his stripes we are healed. How can someone else getting injured heal us? Well, his stripes are the wrath of God, God's judgment for all the evil in the world. Everyone deserves this wrath, but Jesus took it upon himself so that we would have the opportunity to be free from it. As it says in 2 Corinthians 5:21, For he hath made him to be sin for us who knew no sin, that we might be made the righteousness of God in him. Are you beginning to see that the Bible, Old and New Testament, are one cohesive unit? Verses 6 and 7, All we like sheep have gone astray, we have turned everyone to his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He is brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he openeth not his mouth. Alright, so understand this. Jesus was never at a loss for words, and he never lost an argument, but he was submissive to the will of God. And he didn't always talk to those that were judging him. Let's see this exchange with Pilate. The Jews answered him, We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God. When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid. And he went again into the judgment hall, and said unto Jesus, Whence art thou? But Jesus gave him no answer. Then saith Pilate unto him, Speakest thou not to me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and have power to release thee? Jesus answered, Thou couldst have no power against me at all, except it were given thee from heaven. Okay, so you think Jesus would say, I'm from heaven, obviously. But that's not what happened. And how about the exchange that he had with Herod? It says, When Herod saw Jesus, he was exceeding glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and had hoped to see some miracle done by him. Then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. And Herod with his men of war set him at naught and mocked him, and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe, and sent him again to Pilate. Okay, so he literally said nothing when Pilate sent him to Herod. Pilate didn't even want to deal with the situation, but Herod was actually glad to see Jesus at first. And yet it seems Jesus had more respect for Pilate than he had for Herod. And my thought is that this is to teach us that Jesus does not want to be taken lightly by proud people. Herod's attitude was like, oh, hey, Jesus, can you show me a miracle to entertain me? And that's not the right attitude to have with the Son of God. Also, Herod was taking very lightly the fact that he was on trial for his life. He's like, oh, let's go out, get coffee now, because you might have that whole crucifixion thing going on later. Anyway, moving on, verse 8 and 9. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and who shall declare his generation? For he was cut off out of the land of the living. For the transgression of my people was he stricken. And he made his... I can't talk. And he made his grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, because he had done no violence, neither was any deceit in his mouth. Alright, so understand that the whole way that Jesus' case was handled was illegal. He was slapped by the judge. The Sanhedrin condemned him for blasphemy, but when they took him to Pilate, they accused him of treason against Rome. And I thought that Jews complaining like they're trying to protect Rome was interesting. Pilate found him not guilty, but they just kept shouting, crucify him, until they got their way. And this whole thing only took about 9 hours, so you know it wasn't a proper trial for somebody that was on trial for their life. So Jesus didn't get any judgment. He didn't get any time in prison while his case was being settled, because it only took 9 hours. It was a miscarriage of justice. It also says that he made his grave with the wicked and the rich in his death. And As I'm sure you know, he was buried in the tomb of the rich man Joseph of Arimathea, who let him use his own grave that he prepared for himself. When he was crucified, the one thief that was crucified with him was so wicked that he was mocking him as he himself was being crucified. It's like, Jesus, get off the cross if you're the Son of God. Verses 10 and 11. Yet it pleased the Lord to bruise him. He hath put him to grief. When thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin, he shall see his seed, he shall prolong his days, and the pleasure of the Lord shall prosper in his hand. He shall see of the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteous servant justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Alright, so now we get to the exciting part. Like the Philippian jailer said, what must I do to be saved? So this isn't something that automatically saves everyone in the world, whether they believe it or not. I wish that it was, but that's not how it works. You have to make his soul an offering for sin, like the verse says. You have to believe and acknowledge to God what he did for you, at which point you become a child of God. Like it says in John 1:10, he was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God, even to them that believed on his name. So I hope that helps you understand not only what Christ did for you, but that Jesus is firmly rooted in the Old Testament. And there are still many more examples throughout the Old Testament, and hopefully I can cover some of those in the near future. Chapter 53 ends with a nice summary. Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he has poured out his soul unto death. And he was numbered with the transgressors, and bare the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. So it says, a man that died will divide a portion with the great. Christ may have died for you, but he didn't stay that way. And because he lives, you can live also. Thank you. God bless.